Someone's living in our guest house, I said, staring at the security app on my phone. My husband James looked over my shoulder at the footage of lights turning on and off, shadows moving behind curtains, and most alarmingly, new furniture being delivered to our supposedly empty guest house. My name is Deanna Foster, and at 34, I was watching my mother-in-law Barbara stage a hostile takeover of our property while we were celebrating our 10th anniversary in Italy. The worst part, James didn't seem surprised at all. Mom mentioned she might need a place to stay for a while, he mumbled, suddenly very interested in his coffee. I told her she could use the guest house temporarily. I turned to face him, my voice carefully controlled. When exactly did you plan to tell me this? And what happened to her perfectly good 5-bedroom house? She sold it, he admitted, avoiding my eyes. She said she wanted to downsize, be closer to family. You know how she is. Oh, I knew exactly how Barbara was. For 10 years, I'd watched her manipulate situations, push boundaries, and guilt-trip James into doing whatever she wanted. But this was a new level of audacity. James, we're still in Italy. She's not supposed to move in until we're back, right? His silence told me everything. I pulled up the security footage from 3 days ago. There was Barbara, directing movers like a general commanding troops, pointing where her antique furniture should go, supervising as they replace our guest house locks. She'd even started planting her precious roses in my vegetable garden. She's just excited to be closer to us, James offered weakly. Think of how nice it'll be having help with the kids. I thought about our twins, Emma and Liam, who already had a complicated relationship with their grandmother. Barbara's idea of helping usually involved undermining my parenting decisions and telling the kids that mommy's rules are silly. The guest house was supposed to be my art studio, I reminded him. For years, I'd been planning to convert it into a space where I could teach painting classes, something Barbara had dismissed as an impractical hobby. Mom says you can use her old garage for your art stuff, James said, wincing at my expression. She's already offered to clear it out for you. I took a deep breath, remembering the conversation I'd had with my sister Kate just last week. Barbara's planning something, she'd warned. I overheard her at the salon talking about making changes to your property. You might want to check those security cameras while you're away. I'd laughed it off then. Surely my mother-in-law wouldn't be so bold as to move in without properly discussing it first. I'd never been so wrong. My phone buzzed with a text from Barbara herself. Diana, dear, surprise. I've taken the liberty of sprucing up that shabby little guest house. You never used it anyway. We'll have so much fun being neighbors. I've already told all my friends about my new home. The bridge club will meet here every Wednesday. Oh, and I hope you don't mind, but I've scheduled some landscapers to remove those unsightly vegetable beds. Roses are much more appropriate for our neighborhood's aesthetic. I showed James the message, watching as he paled slightly. She's already telling people it's her home. I asked quietly, and making permanent changes to our property. Mom's just enthusiastic, he tried. We can talk to her when we get back. But I was done talking. For 10 years, I'd tried to maintain peace, to be understanding of the unique bond between mother and son. I'd smiled through Barbara's subtle jabs, her constant criticism of my parenting, her attempts to redecorate our house whenever we left town. I opened my laptop and pulled up a folder labeled Plan B. Inside were documents I'd been gathering ever since Barbara's last surprise visit, when she'd rearrange our entire house because Diana's design choices were giving her migraines. What are you doing? James asked, noticing my focused expression. Nothing yet, I replied calmly, just making sure everything's in order for when we get home. Another text from Barbara popped up. By the way, I've taken the liberty of having my mail forwarded to the guest house address. And don't worry about the utilities. I've already called to have them put in my name. It's the least I could do. I smiled, thinking about the documents in my Plan B folder. Barbara thought she was so clever, establishing residency without our explicit permission, creating a situation where we'd look heartless if we tried to make her leave. What she didn't know was that I'd been preparing for something like this for months. Every helpful intervention, every boundary crossed, every manipulation. I documented it all. And now, as she made herself at home in our guest house, she had no idea she was walking right into the trap I'd set. I think I'll call Kate, I told James, who was still staring anxiously at his mother's texts. She might have some interesting insights about Barbara's recent decisions. As I dialed my sister's number, I couldn't help but smile. Barbara wanted to play games. Fine. But she was about to learn that her daughter-in-law wasn't the pushover she thought I was. Kate answered on the second ring. "Please tell me you've seen the security footage," she said without preamble. "Oh, I've seen it," I replied, walking onto our hotel balcony where James couldn't hear. "And I think it's time to put our plan into action. Is everything ready on your end?" "All set," Kate confirmed. "Barbara has no idea what's coming." I looked back through the balcony doors at James, who was now frantically texting his mother, probably trying to damage control a situation that was already far beyond his usual peacekeeping abilities. "Good," I said, "because this time Barbara's going to learn that some surprises work both ways." The rest of our Italian vacation was tense. James kept checking his phone, wincing at the constant stream of updates from Barbara about her improvements to our property. She'd already replaced all the furniture in the guest house, repainted the exterior, that dreadful blue had to go, and was now hosting daily tea parties to show off her new home to her friends. "Mom says she's planning to build a greenhouse where your vegetable garden was," James mentioned hesitantly over breakfast. "She thinks it'll be perfect for her orchid collection." I took a sip of my espresso, scrolling through the latest security footage on my phone. Barbara had invited at least 20 people over yesterday, giving them a grand tour of not just the guest house, but our main property as well. I watched as she led her bridge club through our garden, pointing out all the changes she planned to make. "A greenhouse?" I replied calmly. "How interesting. Has she mentioned how she's planning to pay for these renovations?" James shifted uncomfortably. She was hoping we could help with that, since we're family and all." Of course she was. Barbara had always treated our bank account like her personal renovation fund. But this time things were different. I've been collecting evidence of every unauthorized change, every dollar she'd spent without permission, every message where she claimed the property as her own. "Kate just sent me something interesting," I said, opening my sister's email. "Apparently Barbara's been telling people she's not just living in our guest house. She's claiming we sold it to her." James nearly choked on his coffee. "What? That's not, she wouldn't." I played him the audio clip Kate had recorded at her salon. Barbara's voice came through clearly. "Oh yes, Diana and James sold me the guest house for such a reasonable price. They practically gave it away. I'm having it remodeled now. You know how Diana's taste can be. Everything was so common." James put his head in his hands. "Mom's just excited. She gets carried away sometimes." "Carried away?" I raised an eyebrow. "James, she's claiming legal ownership of our property. She's making permanent changes without permission. She's literally trying to steal our guest house." "She's not stealing," he started, but I cut him off by showing him the latest security footage. Barbara was standing in our main house's kitchen. She'd apparently made a copy of our house keys, directing workmen who were measuring our cabinets. "These will all need to be replaced," she was saying. "Once I convince them to let me redecorate the main house, everything will be perfect." James went pale. "She's in our house. How did she?" "Your mother has been planning this for months," I explained. "Remember when she insisted on house sitting while we were at my parents' Christmas gathering? She made copies of all our keys then." My phone buzzed with another text from Barbara. "Darling, I hope you don't mind, but I've scheduled some contractors to look at the main house next week. That kitchen is simply desperate for an update. Don't worry about the cost. You can just sign over the guest house to me officially, and we'll call it even." I watched James read the message, seeing the moment reality finally started to sink in. His mother wasn't just overstepping. She was trying to take over our entire property. What should we do?" he asked, looking lost. I pulled out my laptop, opening the Plan B folder. "First, we need to talk to our lawyer. I've been documenting everything. The unauthorized changes, the false ownership claims, the property damage. Barbara's not just being pushy anymore. She's committing fraud." "Fraud?" James looked shocked. "Isn't that a bit extreme?" "Is it?" I showed him the social media posts Barbara had been making. Photos of her new house with captions claiming ownership. Posts about her renovation plans, including quotes from contractors for work she had no authority to commission. Even a crowdfunding page she'd started to help restore my new property to its former glory. "Oh God," James muttered, scrolling through the evidence. This is bad." "It gets worse," I said, pulling up more documents. Remember how she suddenly sold her house? Kate did some digging. Barbara's been telling people she sold it because we begged her to move in with us. She's been using that story to get sympathy and donations from her friends. Just then, my phone lit up with a call from our next-door neighbor, Susan. "Diana, I thought you should know. Your mother-in-law is giving tours of your house to real estate agents. She's telling them you're planning to sell and move to a smaller place." I thanked Susan for the information, adding it to my growing file of evidence. James looked like he might be sick. "We have to stop her," he said finally. "But how?" "If we confront her directly, she'll just cry and make us look like the bad guys. She's already told everyone we promised her the guest house." I smiled, opening one final document. That's where Kate comes in. Remember how Barbara's always bragging about her bridge club? Well, Kate's Aunt Martha is a member, and Martha's been recording everything Barbara's been saying about her plans. I played another audio clip. Barbara's voice filled the room. "Once I'm established in the guest house, I'll start working on the main house. Diana's such a pushover, and James never says no to his mother. Before you know it, I'll have the whole property. They'll have to move out eventually. I'll make sure of that." James looked devastated. She's planning to drive us out of our own home." "She's been planning it for months," I confirmed. "But here's what she doesn't know. Every change she's made, every false claim, every unauthorized entry into our home, it's all documented. And tomorrow, when we fly home, she's going to learn that her perfect plan isn't so perfect after all." "What are you going to do?" James asked, finally looking ready to stand up to his mother. I closed my laptop, thinking about the certified letters already waiting at our local post office, the legal documents Kate had helped me prepare, and the surprise I had in store for Barbara's next Bridge Club meeting. Let's just say, I smiled, your mother isn't the only one who knows how to plan ahead. My phone buzzed with another update from our security system. Barbara was in our garden again, this time with a landscaping crew. I watched as she pointed to my beloved vegetable beds, clearly giving instructions for their removal. "Enjoy it while you can, Barbara," I murmured, thinking about what awaited her in just 24 hours. "Your housekeeping days are numbered." Our flight landed at 9 a.m., and by 10, we were pulling into our driveway. Barbara's luxury SUV was parked in what used to be my garden, her personalized license plate QEENB gleaming in the morning sun. The guest house had been transformed, new curtains, a fresh coat of paint, and a large Barbara's Cottage sign hanging over the door. But it was our main house that made James gasp. In just 10 days, Barbara had managed to have our front door repainted pink, replace our modern house numbers with ornate gold ones, and install flowering trellises along every wall. A giant "Welcome to Barbara's Family Estate" banner hung across our garage. "She's lost her mind," James whispered, staring at the transformation. Right on cue, Barbara emerged from our front door, not the guest house, our actual house, wearing an apron and carrying a watering can. "Oh, you're back early," she called, failing to hide her annoyance. "I was just getting ready for the garden club tour this afternoon. We'll be showcasing my new property." I checked my watch. Perfect timing. "Actually, Barbara," I said pleasantly, "you might want to cancel that tour. We have some other visitors coming in about." I paused as 3 cars pulled up to our curb. "Right now, actually." From the first car emerged our lawyer, Patricia Thompson. From the second, Kate and Martha stepped out, carrying folders of documents, and from the third came Officer Reynolds, our local police officer who specialized in property disputes and fraud cases. Barbara's watering can clatter to the ground. What is this?" "This," I said, still smiling, "is what happens when you try to steal someone's house." Patricia stepped forward, handing Barbara a thick envelope. "Mrs. Foster, this is a cease and desist order regarding your false claims of property ownership, unauthorized modifications, and attempted fraud." "Fraud?" Barbara sputtered, looking to James for help. "Darling, tell them this is a misunderstanding. I'm your mother." But James stood firm beside me. "No, Mom, this has gone too far. You can't just take over our home." Martha stepped forward next, and I saw Barbara's face pale. "Hello, Barbara," Martha said sweetly. "The Bridge Club was fascinated by those plans you shared last week. You know, the ones about forcing your son and daughter-in-law out of their home. I have the recordings right here." That's not. Barbara stumbled over her words. Officer Reynolds cleared his throat. Mrs. Foster, we have documented evidence of multiple crimes here: criminal trespass, attempted property theft, fraud, not to mention the contractors you hired under false pretenses. The contractors. Barbara brightened. They've already started work. You can't just stop the renovations now. Actually, Kate joined in, pulling out more documents. I've spoken with every contractor you hired. They're all aware now that you had no authority to commission work on this property. They've agreed to testify if needed. I watched as Barbara's carefully constructed plan crumbled around her. But where am I supposed to live? She wailed. I sold my house. Yes, I nodded. You sold your perfectly good house to try to force your way into ours. That was your choice. You have 24 hours to remove your belongings from our guest house and return our house keys. 24 hours? She shrieked. That's impossible. What about my furniture? My roses? My bridge club meetings? Your roses, I said firmly, are planted in my vegetable garden without permission. The furniture can be moved to storage. We've arranged a company to help. As for your bridge club, I smiled at Martha. I believe they'll be meeting at the community center from now on. Barbara turned to James, tears flowing. You can't let her do this to your mother. I'll be homeless. But James surprised us all by pulling out his phone. Actually, Mom, I found some lovely apartments near the community center. Very reasonable rates. I've already scheduled some viewings for you this afternoon. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Under Officer Reynolds' supervision, moving crews began removing Barbara's furniture from the guest house. Patricia documented every unauthorized change to our property for potential legal action, and Barbara alternated between crying, threatening, and trying to rally support from her friends, who, thanks to Martha's recordings, now knew the full story. By sunset, the Barbara's cottage sign had been taken down. Our house keys had been returned, and Barbara was being driven to her temporary hotel by a very quiet James. I never thought he'd actually stand up to her, Kate marveled, helping me salvage what was left of my vegetable garden. Sometimes people surprise you, I replied, thinking about how James had finally chosen our family over his mother's manipulation. When James returned an hour later, he looked exhausted but relieved. She's actually blaming herself, he said, sinking into our porch swing. Says she might have slightly overstepped. Slightly? I raised an eyebrow. He laughed, a genuine, free sound I hadn't heard in weeks. I told her she needs therapy, and that until she gets help and learns to respect boundaries, she won't be getting unsupervised access to our home or the kids. I sat beside him, taking his hand. How does it feel? Terrifying, he admitted. Liberating. Right. 6 months later, our property had been restored to its original state, minus Barbara's roses, which had mysteriously failed to thrive in my carefully tended vegetable garden. The guest house was finally becoming my art studio, and my first painting classes were already fully booked. Barbara, surprisingly, had taken our ultimatum seriously. She was in therapy, living in a lovely apartment near the community center, and slowly learning to respect boundaries. She was allowed supervised visits with the twins, and while she occasionally made comments about my unusual parenting choices, she caught herself quickly. I got rid of the QENB license plate, she told me during a recent visit. My therapist says it sent the wrong message. The bridge club now met at her apartment, where Martha made sure the conversation stayed focused on cards rather than property takeover schemes. And James, he found his voice, learning to balance being a good son with being a good husband and father. As for me, I kept the Plan B folder, though now it was mostly filled with photos of my thriving garden, my art students' work, and our happy, boundary-respecting family. You know, Kate said during our weekly coffee date, Barbara's actually telling people how proud she is of your art classes. No backhanded compliments, just genuine pride. I smiled, thinking of the security cameras I still checked occasionally, not out of fear now, but habit. Sometimes the best plans, I said, are the ones that help everyone grow. James found me in the garden later that day, planting new vegetables where Barbara's roses had failed. No regrets? He asked, knowing how hard the past months had been. None, I replied, patting the rich soil. Some things need to be uprooted before better things can grow. And in the end, that's exactly what we did. Uprooted the old patterns of manipulation and control, and planted something healthier in their place. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply standing firm and letting truth take root.